and Hospital de Mar, and it's focusing on subtle cognitive decline, topic that is maximum interest for us. Of course, we are focusing on biomarkers the same as Barcelona veterans, but I think that the concept of precision medicine starts in the clinic. So we have to really, we can do much more in the clinic, I think, to detect these very subtle signs and symptoms, not only with the new digital markers, but also with the conventional neuropsychological studies. So, and I think that, well, I have heard some of your talks, and really a great talk, and forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pascual, for the introduction and for the invitation. Paul said, I'm focused in this pre-MCI stage, which we can call subtle cognitive decline. And I have changed a bit, as you can see in the title, to include these digital biomarkers also, because I think that they are very interesting also to capture the earliest changes in Alzheimer's disease. So I will focus in the preclinical stage of Alzheimer's disease at my center at BBRC. We are focused in research in the preclinical stage of AD, and we study only individuals before MCI. Now we have some individuals that have progressed to MCI, but the majority of them are people at risk, either because they have family history of Alzheimer's disease or cognitive complaints, and indeed we have an overrepresentation of individuals carrying the APOE4, 1 and 2 alleles. So regarding the preclinical stage of AD, even in the past century, there were several studies showing us that individuals without any cognitive impairment already shown some neurofibrillary tangles and tau. And in 2010, Clifford Jack and colleagues presented this hypothetical model in which they gave of events in Alzheimer's. And now I can say that we have a lot of evidence, for example, in this study, this very recent study from New England Journal of Medicine, that are confirming this hypothetical cascade of events. Regarding cognition, we all know that in cognitive aging, there is a physiological impact in cognitive performance, which is normal aging, and the trajectory that we are interested in is this that deviates from the expected trajectory in normal aging. The higher the cognitive impairment, the lower the complexity of the methods to assess and to capture it. This is very clear at the dementia stage, with the criteria also consider that with only a clinical interview or some screening tests is enough to detect this cognitive impairment. But if we move earlier for MCI, we do need more specific tests, tapping several domains, memory, intention, executive function, and adding these psychometric techniques to really capture the people that are performing below expectations. But if we move earlier in the preclinical AD, if we want to capture this very early, very subtle change in the preclinical stage, we need more sensitive methods, more challenging tasks, digital biomarkers, and these kind of things to be really, really sensitive. I will focus in this part in my talk. And regarding cognition in preclinical AD, it's already recognized that there is a pre-MCI stage that in the criteria from 2011 is called the stage 3 in people with amyloidosis, neurodegeneration, and subtle cognitive decline. And this subtle cognitive decline can be ascertained by a decline from the on baseline, so inter-individual change, still within the normal range in a standard test, because if you are outside the normal range, then you are MCI. Also, we can use more challenging episodic memory tests to capture this subtle cognitive decline, and also self-complaints, no, the subjective cognitive decline, SCB. In the research criteria from Jack in 2018, there was a change in the name and the staging. Now it's stage 2 to better match with the GDS staging, in fact, no, because this is like a matching with the GDS. And here is pretty the same. Decline in previous level of cognitive function, SCD, subjective reports, and or this change from baseline, but they incorporate this time frame as compared to 1 year. To date, we don't have yet any standard definition of subtle cognitive decline, which is you saw that more than 10 years ago it was proposed in the standard criteria from Sterling. And there are some approaches that I think that the most robust one is the one performed by Mark Bondi at San Diego, in which using always ADNI data, they only focus in ADNI data, and they try to make what they call actuarial definition for both MCI and objective subtle cognitive decline. And you can see here the definitions using 6 variables from 3 domains, 2 for memory, 2 for language, 2 for executive and attention. They labeled individuals as having MCI if they perform below 1 standard deviation in at least 2 scores within 1 domain, or if they have at least 1 score below 1 standard deviation in the 3 domains considered. And this is MCI for them. Regardless, the clinical label in ADNI is quite different, and they demonstrated that their labeling for MCI are more robust than the clinical one in terms of progression to dementia, for example. And afterwards, they use an adaptation of this criteria to define objective SCD. And they say if you have at least 1 low score or 2 scores, but in different domains, because if it's in the same domain, you are MCI, they incorporate these memory process measurements, which are learning curves, presence of intrusions, interference, these kind of things, also to define this objective SCD, and you can have 1 of each. By using this definition, they published quite a number of papers, and they demonstrated that this objective SCD have increased for incident MCI, they have increased white matter hyperintensities, more neurodegeneration, faster cognitive decline. It also predicts amyloid accumulation. They have brain hypoperfusion, and even in these objectively defined individuals, as compared to those that are complaining, they have increased levels of tau. I mean, it's more predicted for tau, the objective decline, than the complaints. Within individuals with complaints, even if you are using such a flexible threshold, such as half a standard deviation below the mean to classify individuals with minor neuropsychological deficits, this is a recent paper in the code, the German cohort. And as you can see here, in the individuals complaining, with SCD, those that have, for sure, not impaired, but less than a half standard deviation, they really have this increased likelihood to progress to MCI. The thing is that you use such a liberal threshold, you are really using this dispenser type, which is 30. I mean, in the distribution of cognitively normal people, there are more than 30 people performing below this cutoff. But probably here is a combination of complaints and indeed some level of decline. But those approaches were cross-sectional. They use cross-sectional normative data to define these groups. If you add this longitudinal change to define the group, for example, in this very interesting paper from Catherine Papp, in 3 cohorts in ADNI, in ABLE, in the Australian one, and also in the Harvard Aging study. In this case, they follow or they use data, follow-up data up to 6 years for everyone, and use the 3 first years to define the slope of every individual. And then use the lower tertile as a category of individuals that are declining a bit, using the PAC, the preclinical Alzheimer's cognitive composite that encompasses the active remembering test, theoretical memory, coding, and in this case, the memory. So we follow people for 3 years and then separate them from decliners. But as you can see, the level of decline is really, really low, like 0.14 standard deviation. But using this, always in cognitively unimpaired individuals, no MCIs here, and this is the likelihood of progressing to MCI. So using the slope of the individual, we are able to predict who is going to convert in the next 3 years. If we review a bit the effect of the Alzheimer's disease pathology, even in cognitively unimpaired individuals, cognitively healthy individuals, there are plenty of literature pointing out that there is an effect of amyloidosis in cognitively healthy people. This is a cross-sectional study in the A4 with more than 2 effects. And as you can see here, with the load of clorbetasol are related to lower scores for every domain of the PAC and the components of the PAC. And the same for longitudinal studies. Individuals that are amyloid positive tend to decline, and this makes sense because at the end they are more likely to progress to MCI. You can see here, separated by ApoE, the amyloid positive individuals that are declining, but not the amyloid negative ones. What happens if we add tau positivity? If we add tau positivity in this study, this is for me really striking because if you are amyloid positive, tau positive, the likelihood of progress to MCI is really high. You can see here in 2-3 years, this is using amyloid PET and tau PET in 4 cohorts, in the Canadian cohort PVNTD, HABs, Australians, and the Washington one. And the numbers are not so high because we don't have so many cohorts with this characteristic, but it seems that the probability of declining in the next 3 years to progress to MCI is quite high.
The other interesting data is that the amyloid plus tau negative, it's not that it's not just likely that they progress, right? So tau
yeah, sure. At the end, as you know, tau is more related to clinical symptoms than clinical onset. So these are the individuals that are really, and in terms of even of AD labeling, they are the ones that are in the AD continuum. So within this preclinical idea, the same as in MCI, we can have several trajectories different by domain. MCI is recognized that there are amnestic MCI, non-amnestic MCI, MCI, etc. Probably in preclinical Alzheimer's disease is the same. What seems clear is that the higher the number of domains are not impaired but with low scores. I mean, because if you are impaired, you are already labeled as MCI, but even you have low scores in these domains, this spatial executive memory language. This is the group that is likely to progress to MCI. Followed a bit by this group, memory language, which is a and this one. In our cohort, we have, as I said, a cohort of cognitively unimpaired individuals at higher risk of AD. Some of them are amyloid positive, and a bit or a small percentage are also tau positive. But here we compare using quite robust composites, merging several memory scales, the free and cute, the memory binding test, the logical memory, and also the NIH toolbox picture sequence memory test. Making a composite, we found that the decline after 3 years, which is not so high because all of them are cognitively unimpaired, but it's significant. So we are able to capture some decline using a composite like this in the individuals that are already amyloid positive, but not in executive function. In our cohort, there are other cohorts. For example, in BioFinder, they published that they found the ratio between and 8 is related to amyloidosis, but not the memory measure in BioFinder. But at the end, they are using only one test, and obviously it seems like a composite is more is a better measure, a better representation of actual memory performance, and also for the executive function one. And as you can see here, there is some linear association with memory, but not with executive function. An interesting finding is that even in individuals that are amyloid negative and tau negative, if you use a sensitive measure, for example, like this, the ratio between p-tau181 and amyloid, we found some association between the change in episodic memory after 3 years and the biomarkers in people at subthreshold levels. So this indicates that even at the very early stages of some neuropathological changes related to Alzheimer's disease, it seems that there are some effects. So how we can improve the way in which we capture these earliest cognitive changes in preclinical AD. I propose several approaches that can be also merged and combined. And the first one is using more sensitive reference norms based in individuals with normal AD biomarkers, because we saw that amyloidosis, even in cognitively impaired individuals, have some impact in cognitive performance. So if we want to capture the subtle change related to amyloidosis, then we need to remove individuals with amyloidosis from the normative sample. Using also these reliable change indexes to add the trajectories rather than the cross-sectional measurements in this concept, also adding base rates and using more challenging tests. Regarding the first one, which is the normative, more sensitive sampling, just to remember how we decide that a score is impaired is like an hypothesis testing. We have like a normal, or say the distribution of scores that comes from cognitively healthy individuals, regarding the distribution, but theoretically would be like this. And then when we have one individual's scores, we place the score in this continuum, and if it falls here, there is a low likelihood that the individual is cognitively normal. So this is the way in which we interpret the test. Ideally, after correcting by age, education, sex, or whatever we correct. We know in the last years that there are a relevant percentage of cognitively healthy individuals that already have pathological levels of amyloid in their brain. And we saw that this has an impact in cognition. So the idea was to remove these individuals from the normative samples to make them more sensitive. And this was in my PhD defense in 2012. I used a neuronorma sample And José Luis Molino told me that probably you have some preclinical individuals here in this normative sample. So maybe your means are low than if you remove the preclinical AD individual. So after some years, not 10 years after, I developed this approach just to trying to, at the end, is like increasing sensitivity, like shifting the distribution by removing these individuals that have some small but significant cognitive decline due to amyloidosis and so on. So we have published 2 papers, one for the memory measures, the free and cute, and the logical memory task. And here for the other tests from the battery, attentional, executive, linguistic, spatial, so on. And with David, we made available this open access spreadsheet, which the link is in this paper, and it's open. And the spreadsheet provides with the percentage, the scores, and every measure you put, the demographics and the scores of your individuals. And we compare this to the standard neuronormal criteria, just to demonstrate that they are more sensitive as expected. So we use these new sensitive criteria like below as impaired if the score is below 1.5 standard deviation. And for the neuronormal, we use the regular scores below 5, which is equal to percentile 5, and this is 6. So by reapplying these both cutoffs in our samples and separating them by AT status, you can see here, this is the standard normative data, the neuronorma, and for example, the percentage of individuals below the cutoffs are really, really low. And there were no differences with the expected percentage. If you think in the cognitively healthy population, you expect having individuals with the lowest scores in this percentage, like the theoretical one. These are the more sensitive measurements, as you can see here, mainly the A+, B+ individuals. Some of them are indeed falling below the cutoff. There are some differences here, but here in the A+, T+ individuals, there were really a higher percentage than expected, and by using these more sensitive numbers. So in this case, using cross-sectional data, we're able to capture some memory changes related to AT status. Let's add the longitudinal part. This was like a cross-sectional, but now in classical psychometrical manuals, you have this definition in which a test score, and every test or questionnaire, we have like a true score, which is related to the actual domain or measure that you are trying to capture, and an error. But for longitudinal assessments, it's the same. It's another layer of complexity. So you have some score change, but some part is true change, another part is error. Nice. So how we do decide if a change in cognition is significant or not? We can use the reliable change index approach, because we know that and you can see here the waves, in normal cognition there are some variations, and the scores are not always the same in repeated assessment. They even can be higher, due to practice effect, for example, or depending on the day, if the individual has not slept well, maybe they have a declining score. The idea is to define like these bands of normal trajectory, which encompasses this, let's say, normal change in cognitively healthy individuals, and identify who is performing outside of this trajectory. There are some well-recognized methods to derive these reliable change indexes. This review paper from Kevin Duff, 2012, is really, really good and explained very well the methods. And the most easier way to define this change in a way, in like a normative data for change, no reference for change. You can simply subtract time 2 minus time 1, and then you got like a percentile distribution in normal people. No? In cognitively healthy people, you can define like a distribution of change. Some people are improving, some people are worsening. But then you can add more complexity, for example, adding variability of the measures, the test reliability of the test, the error of the estimates, the practice effects, and also the socio-demographic effects. For example, maybe the change between visits is not the same for a person at the 80s as a person in the 60s. Indeed, I have published some time ago this 1-year reference norm for change using the neuronorma data, because in the neuronorma project we had some longitudinal data in the cognitively healthy individuals. And for example, here you have this distribution of percentage of discrepancy, simple discrepancy. For example, less than 5% of the sample lost more than 5 words in the free and acute total recall, for example. And you can use this as a threshold of significant decline. So if you have a person that after 1 year, you record a decline that it's 6 words in the total recall from the free and acute selective remaining test, then you can say that this is a significant decline as compared to a normative sample. And you can make more complex calculations, for example, adding age, adding baseline score, and then you can derive like a expected or predicted score, and then you can calculate the deviation of the individual from this expected score. We are doing the same with our data in the alpha plus cohort. And for example, if you use this cutoff, because at the end you get zeta scores, standard deviations of change here. And then by using this that relates to percentile 5, you can derive like a cutoff. For example, here, a cutoff after 3 years in this case, because here the difference between visit 1 and visit 2 is 3 years. And then, for example, for the training in test B, if you perform the task 47 seconds slower than your baseline, you are outside the expected trajectory of change in the test. Okay, so we have a really huge battery with a lot of measures, a lot of variables. How many variables should be below the threshold to decide that someone has impairment or has a relevant decline? And this is not only relevant for our preclinical ADs, other cognitive decline. This is also relevant for MCI. So how many measures are you use to diagnose people as having MCI? But in our case, and using this cognitive change reference norm as a framework, we wanted to be evidence-based in this sense. And in this really interesting paper from Javier Oltra from Alicante, in which they precisely asked about this, using more than 5,000 individuals from the National Alzheimer's Coordinating Center. They tested how many low scores, and they define a low score, a score below 1.5 standard deviation, in cognitively normal individuals. If you perform only one test, then you have around 5% of probabilities of for and cognitively healthy individuals as having an impaired score. So it's like, you know, by chance, by probability. If you obviously perform in this blue line, not the 10 tests, then the chance of having at least one impaired score is like 30% because you are adding probability of having low scores, even being cognitively healthy. But when you put the cutoff or the threshold by asking, for example, 2 low scores or 3 low scores from the battery, then the probabilities that you get these low scores by chance are really low. So, for example, in our battery, for 8 measures, 8 variables, we choose the cutoff for considering decline in at least 3 or more low scores, at least 3 or more, because by using this, you have only even less than 2% probability of having this performance in cognitively healthy individuals. So you are increasing the specificity. Now, by putting more sensitive reference norms, then you are increasing the sensitivity. But by using this, you are increasing the specificity.
It's dependent on the domain.
Yes, they use not these tests, and it's independent of the domain. Yeah, this is a good point. Because at the end, all the domains tend to be correlated among them, and it is a good follow-up.
How did you define the normality? The normality.
Yeah.
Because here you are thinking that some cases actually for five.
Yeah, sure.
The case. So how do you define the normality, the cognitive normality to define the sample?
Yes, this is obviously this is crucial because how we define the reference sample. I think that here is not MCI, not dementia, but maybe some of them could be a bit impaired or whatever. You can control, if you can control very well the reference sample, then maybe you have like super healthy individuals as a reference, and everything then is not like a decline, or it's a matter, I think, of debate because. But anyway, you expect some, for example, this 5% by defining the normal distribution and deriving the scores, then you have like this. By using the normal sample, you expect having at least 5% bad definition below the threshold.
To apply the common criteria for define my cognitive impairment, 4% of cases could be considered or diagnosed as my cognitive impairment. So they are not cognitive normal.
Yes, only using neuropsychological performance, yes. But maybe you have here also the clinical judgment. I mean, they are not they are not diagnosed as having my cognitive impairment. I think that at least in the NAC, it's like this. It's like a clinical level, and then obviously there is an overlap between samples.
Of the operational definition of my cognitive impairment.
Yes.
I totally agree with this consideration and this proposal. As take into account many cognitive scores, the diagnosis will be more refined and specific, more robust.
So here, the idea was to apply these base rates, what they call, like having to account the base range of low cognitive scores in cognitively healthy individuals. And we asked, by using, for example, this battery of 8 measures, that the change was below this cutoff, no, the percentile 5 at the end, in at least 3 or more, to define a group, pre-MCI group, as an objective subtle cognitive decline. And we found that 23 individuals of our sample like this. And in fact, the baseline levels of plasma, GFAP, and p-tau231 were related to the probability of being classified as these at follow-up, so after 3 years. We also applied these only to memory, using 8 memory scores. And by using this, you can see here, we found like 26 individuals out of 300, more or less, always cognitively unimpaired individuals in the sense that they are not MCI. As you can see here, there is an overrepresentation of the double positives, A+, T+, and also when we made a voxel-based morphometry with the change, these are maps for gray matter change. As you can see here, there were like a loss, I don't want to say atrophy, but at least less volumes in the hippocampal volume, and increments in other areas that are relevant in the cortex, in the AD signature, that have been already described, these nonlinear increments of cortical fields. We also try to relate to p-tau in some individuals by being a more liberal in the threshold, because otherwise the sample size was really, really small. But we saw that there was an association to BRCA1 and to the transentorhinal regions in the tau PET deposition. So we could also use more challenging tasks. And I want to introduce you, if you don't know, the memory binding test, which is like an extension of the free and acute selective reminding test. In the free and acute selective reminding test, there are like 16 words, and here you have 2 lists of 16. So there are 32 words to recall, to learn here. And the procedure is very similar to the free and acute selective reminding test. But the interesting thing is that you can see here in the plot, this is a plot in which we have in the y-axis, the free and acute, total delayed recall, and in the x-axis, the MBT. And for the free and acute, we have like a ceiling effect in which individuals that are at the top, for example, this one is the maximum in the total delayed recall is 16. However, this individual is having only 19 from the 32 possibles in the MBT. And we have this distribution at the top. So for individuals that are performing really well, they are cognitively normal, they are really educated, and these kind of things, the free and acute selective reminding test, which was devised to capture the PI, in fact, is not sensitive enough because it has like a ceiling effect that is avoided by the memory binding test. Just adding a lot of words. Here is more challenging. ¿Cuál la pila? Pues bueno, vamos pasando. Espera un segundo. So we developed forms in Spanish, in Catalan, Form A and Form B for the MPT, which are available. They're not commercial, and you can contact us if anyone wants to use it. So, we have published some reference data. I am working in extended reference data, and we have published this conversion validity with it. Okay. So, for example, by using the memory binding test, we saw differences adjusted by everything, no? Age, sex, location, a lot of things, in people that have complaints and that are not present with the free and cute selected remaining test, for example. And just to add another topic that has some is a research line more marginal, but there are some studies regarding the emergence of discrepancies between domains. In MCI and dementia also is quite well established, but even in preclinical AD, we have these results in which by contrasting the performance in verbal working memory and visual working memory, it seems that when you have, this is the positive and negative amyloid individuals, and there's a trend in which once you have amyloid, then you tend to make worse the visual working memory test as compared to the verbal one, which is not present and even is different in the individuals before being amyloid positive. And to finish, I have some slides on digital biomarkers. Digital biomarkers is simply an objective measure that can quantify any physiological or behavior performance that use a digital device, and it's quite broad. There are two main categories within digital biomarkers: the passive, in which the individuals has to really not to interact with the device, like having an actigraph or a mobility device, keystroke patterns in the smartphone, for example, and also GPS tracking, for example, to track your movements around, regardless privacy things and this kind of things. And then the active digital biomarkers, in which the individual has to interact with the device, making cognitive tests or speech, for example. So there are obviously some advantages and limitations regarding the use of digital biomarkers. The advantages: less burden for the participant, for the researcher, for the clinician, is less invasive, collect real world data because we are collecting data in many cases at home. It's independent of bias, at least now this is the idea. And a relevant thing is that we can collect a lot of data with a lot of resolution, for example, with micro movements every second, reaction times, all of this stuff that can be fed into artificial intelligence algorithms to look for patterns. And also this allows for continuous or more frequent assessment that go into the clinics to perform a control. Regarding the limitations, obviously there's an unequal access to technology and digital literacy, from people, for all people. Privacy issues, lack of supervision by clinicians. We don't know what's happening at home, and most tools are not yet validated. There's a lot of work in progress to validate digital biomarkers. Some examples, for example, the Neotif, which is a smartphone battery, in which there are some more typical tasks, such as the permitting test, digit symbol substitution, a coding, and it's combined with other more novel paradigms, like this one, trying to capture in a bit phrenological way, as you can see here, the functioning of several brain regions. With Neotifs, they have demonstrated good feasibility in more than 1,000 individuals here, and most importantly, they validated it against MCI diagnosis with good prognostic ability. Example here, so you can see the RMR is more than 0.8, and it's quite well associated to the PAC, which is the PAC-5 as a gold standard face-to-face measure. Another interesting one is the branch from Boston, from Catherine Papp. It's mainly based on memory assessment. All the tasks are memory-based. And they have also demonstrated good associations with the pack and some association to PET amyloid and PET. An interesting feature of the branch is that it could be used as an ecological momentary assessment. And this means that you could perform very frequent but short assessments. For example, here is during 1 week, every day, several times a day. And within this week, they are able to separate individuals with amyloid positivity and amyloid negativity based on the practice effects, on the ability to learn and to improve. You can see the curves that more or less after the 3-4 days, the pattern in amyloid positive individuals, the curve began to be more flat, and the amyloid negative are still learning and improving the performance. But for those that are not so keen in using touch screens, smartphones, tablets, there are some other approaches, less technological. For example, automated assessment through the landline phones, an automatic phone call in which individuals can perform some sort of neuropsychological task or speech simply to be analyzed using artificial intelligence. We are participating in this study, Prospective, in which individuals receive every 3 months a call, which lasts around 12 to 15 minutes, and they are performing. It's in progress, this study, but we are going to present at AAIC some preliminary results, and it seems that in the first 4 individuals in this other cohort that we have with SCD, only individuals with subjective cognitive decline, but not MCI here. And by analyzing the speech features, as you can see here, there are a lot of features, temporal, semantic, voice, whatever, by doing the ray auditory verbal blending task and the semantic fluency, we are able really to separate individuals with amyloid positivity and amyloid. And the same for tau, also, no? Tau. Although the numbers here are lower. And to finish, another kind of digital biomarker in which we are working on also is the Altoida, which is an augmented reality app in which you have to place some digital objects around, and you have to move around the room later on to find the object. And during this time, you also, at the same time, you have to push here when you hear a tone, a beat. So it's like a dual tasking, and the device is collecting a lot of data, thousands per second or whatever, because it's like every micro movements and these kind of things to calculate a final score, which is also able really good to discriminate MCI from SCD. You can see here there's a huge difference between SCD and MCI. This is a collaboration with a hospital clinic. And also, not so good, but we are able also to discriminate between amyloid positive and negative. To finish, I think that to assess cognitive function in preclinical AD is feasible, but we need more sensitive methods, more challenging tasks, more refined psychometric approaches. I really think that we can define this subtle cognitive decline or transitional cognitive decline as a pre-MCI relevant clinical entity. Digital biomarkers validation is in progress, but I think that these short repeated assessments are really showing promising results. And also using speech analysis over the phone might be useful for those with less digital literacy, because otherwise we are all only focusing in people with digital. And thank you for listening. And please, questions or comments.
Very much, Gonzalo.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. I am very interested in the last topic. I don't know if you are sure about that fact.
Mhm.
From the computerized and maybe you can share your opinion about that.
I know TAPCAT because it was used in NIPAD study, in the European Prevention of Dementia cohort. And I think that there are really some good tests there. For example, no, the favorite test, no, in which you have to learn the person and the favorite meal and color or something like this. So like these kind of tests, I think that they are really good. Indeed, the database from IPAD is available, so you can use it if you want. And I think that from TAPCAT, it was this and also a flanker test. And I think that there are a lot of tools, digital tools that are useful and are available. And in this case, for example, with the TAPCAT, it's of interest because you have this data set with more than 2,000 people available, only asking for the data in the website.
I was reading about validation and they were develop a score, a factor score. So at the end, you can recover 3 kinds of factor scores. One of them is related with control or inhibitory abilities. So I think I agree with you that these kinds of tools are very useful when you can want to capture this kind of answers really related with the time, especially related with the time. And in inhibitory tasks, most of the times it is not possible for the human or the neuropsychologist to observe that.
Absolutely. I think that reaction times, for example, by using these digital tools, are opening a new field. In fact, there are some results, for example, regarding variability, because it seems that people with even NEPOE for carriers shows increased variability within a run of the test, even in 30 seconds. Jason Hasselstaff from Washington was presenting some weeks ago in Barcelona some data on this, and they found that even in 30 seconds, they found differences in variability, not in the mean of reaction time, but in the variability of responses. So it seems that there are some features that are quite new in this sense, and that it's like a shift from the paradigms that were used in the laboratory to the more real world for clinical use.
I feel an idea from your talk is that probably we should rethink the term preclinical Alzheimer's disease, right? Because it's completely preclinical. So you can, I mean, the more we advance, the more clinical it becomes. No? So preclinical is I guess it will in the end change.
Yes, no, it's like a semantic thing at the end. If you are finding some things, and
It's not preclinical anymore.
it's clinical.
It's clinical already. So
Yes.
Other syndromes, right? Like Parkinson's disease, that many things that now we are part of the clinical. Yeah. I was wondering if you have some experience in accelerated long-term forgetting, which is another paradigm that is also very interesting in detecting this kind of
Yes. There are some studies doing like 1 week delayed recall, and there are some works ongoing. In fact, I am collaborating with people from the hospital clinic, with Lorena Rami and Andrea Tor, is working on this. And also we have started just to call our participants after a week and asking for the 3 and Q words without any saying nothing. I will call you. So, but we don't have data yet, but I think that it could be maybe the feasibility to be implemented in the clinics is a bit difficult, no? But I think that for sure is another way to tackle this, these early changes. And maybe more ecological, no? Because it's more similar to the real world in which, no, you told me, you tell me something, and after a week, no, we were talking, not told me anything. So,
So you are collecting this data right now?
Yes.
We are collecting in Valencia. Neuropsychologist who's doing the PhD with me. She's also doing this in our. In Valencia, we have a study similar to alpha gamma position, and they are not as enriched, although they are enriched in pathology and we are basically doing the same. 1 week later, we are asking for the same words and
using
capture
which text
the
use?
Busquet.
Okay.
So, and yeah, my question is that in the era of plasma biomarkers, how we, what would be the place of this new advancement in neuropsychology? How when to work this before and after the plasma, focusing on individuals at risk, or how you envision the place of neuropsychology, this field of neuropsychology that you are showing to us in this new era, where we will have a blood test that will give us the risk of Alzheimer's.
I think, and in line with this, for example, the view of the international working group, led by Bruno Dubois, that said that if you have amyloid positive and tau positive, but no symptom at all, then you are only like at risk, and you don't have to do anything, and you don't have to look for it proactively, because you don't know at the end who is going to progress and when. So, in my view, by using this, I would say, likely phenotyping using digital biomarkers, for example, through your iPhone or a smartphone or whatever, and if we can likely monitor people, and then when something is suggesting that that there's a change, then maybe in this on this moment you could go to do a blood test, but not at the end, because not at the opposite, because I think that maybe doing like population screening for p-taus or whatever without any clinical symptom or judgment or whatever could be a bit difficult to implement and to manage.
How would you select those individuals that are being follow up with markers? Which individuals would you target? Because it wouldn't be a general screen, right?
Yeah, depending, because for example, the Alzheimer's Disease International made 2 years ago, I think, some recommendations, some guidelines proposing like an annual or biannual checkup on memory using whatever, and probably a digital tool. But if you can have something that is really, really cost effective, really sensitive, and also specific, that could be done in a large way, then this could be like a selection approach for those that can undergo a blood test for Alzheimer's disease. For sure, depending on age. I mean, after 65, after 60, or I don't know. I think that even with the blood biomarkers available, I think that we need some cognitive phenotypes and some clinical inputs to really interpret this.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you, I think. But I find a bit complicated at this time to implement a kind of general screening because the policy, the politicians. But definitely you can do that in selected groups. I don't know, the QE44, if you detect them, or individuals with cardiovascular or diabetics or kind of things. I think that would be a good strategy to start with some follow-up, and then if things change, to plasma biomarkers and maybe continue sending results.
Not sure. It makes sense now to start with people with high risk because cardiovascular factors and TPOE and so on.
Questions? Maybe you can read it.
Yes, I wonder if you have any data about longitudinal reversion to this is a good question. So just as happens in in MCI, yeah, sure. The thing is that just as in MCI, there are some individuals that reverse to normality after follow-up, and at the end, cognition is like could be affected one day, because mood, because sleep, because a lot of things, and then for sure that the reversion at this stage, at this subtle cognitive decline stage, could be even higher than those observed in MCI. But anyway, I think that by using these base rates and more specific ways to really put labelings, not only using one test, one variable, and using more variables and being more specific, I think that it could be really improved.
This is a key question because one of the biggest problem of this definition is that there is very heterogeneous. And for example, the paper you saw by Wilhelmine Jensen, they didn't find difference between controls and subjective cognitive decline in terms of biomarkers. Well, it's not a large population, but it was a big study. But the thing is that it was so heterogeneous, and they put all the individuals that were like subjective cognitive. That's probably which we should try to find a more objective and more robust definition.
Yes, and probably matching both, in people with cognitive complaints, but evidence of some decline. Yeah. Objectively change, because otherwise could be related to mood or anxiety or not.
I totally agree with you and with your presentation about the possibility of now some subtle changes or subtle differences if we are able to use precise methods and to identify some cases that are the pre-clinical phase of some neurodegenerative to expand the concept and the practical application of the concept of mild cognitive. This mild, very, very mild.
Yeah.
My question is practical. To some extent, you have already answered the question. Answer to as well. The practical usefulness of this approach is to identify, prevent, define preventive methods. But my question is, this type of studies approaches have been performed in population-based cohorts. I think that might no. And the practical problems of this of even of my internal concept is when you apply it to a population-based group, and when you find out the difficulties, the limitations. My question is, this type of studies have been, some of them, any of them have been performed in population-based cohorts.
I don't think so. In our studies, our cohort is a bit mixed because it's not a clinical cohort, but it's not population-based in the sense of having like random people from the population. They are volunteering because they have a family history or this, or are interested or are worried about their brain health or things like this. Indeed, there are several differences, even in STD, in people with complaints, when you have like a more clinical population from the clinics, memory clinics, people attending because they have attend to the general practitioner, the primaria, and then they are referred. So they are a bit screened, and people at clinics with STD are more likely to have positive biomarkers and progress to MCI. But in the studies that are more population-based, for example, in Fundación ACE, they have both cohorts, the one from the typical clinics and another for people volunteering, please come if you want to participate or whatever. And people with STD from this population-based cohort are really less likely to have something in genetic. So I think that in our case is like it's not population based but not clinic. It's like in the middle, volunteers. But for sure, if you have someone in your clinics, because these people are really worried, and it's an increasing in the pretest probability because we have a right to this. So the application in general population for sure could be more difficult and more probably the number of false positives could be really higher. Thank you.